Hello, this is David Bishai, and we're here to go through part one of our lecture on the role of government in health. And in this part, we're going to cover the concept of Pareto Optimality, and we owe a lot of this economics to famous economist Vilfredo Pareto, who worked in Switzerland from 1848 to 1923. In order to cover this topic, I'd like to develop some notation for the elements of welfare economics. We are going to develop a definition for three things. An economy, which is a list of all of the items owned by every individual in a population. You could imagine that this is an extremely long list of all the stuff in the economy. But that's what we're going to use today. The economy is the list of items. We're going to define utility as a mapping from the list of items that one person owns to a number. It's usually a positive number, can be negative, describing how satisfied they are with the list of items that they own. And finally, we're going to define social welfare as a mapping from an economy to a number describing how satisfied the population is with the economy. So fundamental to this entire set of thinking is that there is private property ownership, and people acquire items. They could acquire services, but mostly items that they own, and the act of owning these items creates satisfaction that can be measured with a number. This is fundamental to what we're going to be doing throughout economics. So now that we have these definitions, an economy, the utility from the economy, and social welfare, we can start thinking about ways to make utility higher for one person, and we can think of ways to make social welfare better for an entire economy, and we can compare hundreds and hundreds of potential economies to ask which one creates the most social welfare, and that's where we're going. So if we think about how to use these concepts, we can give out a formula for social welfare as W equals the sum of weighted utilities. So there's a weighting factor for each person, lambda sub I, and we multiply lambda sub I times u sub I in order to calculate the sum of all of the welfares. So there are different weighting schemes for lambda I. The most familiar one that you've seen before is that everybody is equal and all utilities count equally. Nobody counts more than anybody else. And so we just make lambda I disappear because we've set it equal to 1. A different scheme might be that there's a Rawlsian scheme where the poorest person in the economy counts and nobody else counts. And so this economy tries to identify its social welfare with the well-being of the least well-off person. In contrast, a Nietzschean social welfare function would identify the most well-off individual and call them the Übermensch and try to make the economy maximize that welfare. That might be similar to what a dictatorship is trying to accomplish, for instance, where all of the economy tries to make the sovereign maximize their utility. In the Confederacy, the well-being of African Americans was 0 in this weighting scheme, and only the well-being of whites mattered in how they approached maximizing social welfare. In a kleptocracy, such as we might live in America today or someday, lambda I might be a weighting factor times the amount that one donates to a candidate, that we've identified a ruling entourage that contributes to the sovereign, and your social welfare is given back to you in proportion to how much you're donating to a political campaign. And on and on. But the concept to come away with is that we're going to play the game of trying to get W to be big. Different constitutions and political economies act differently in who matters and who counts. But the name of the game is trying to make W big, and to make W big, we have to take into account individual utilities. So if we examine policy changes, we can set up a set of resource holdings, of the holdings of resources by people in the economy numbered 1 through n. So we have EJ is an economy. It's the jth economy, and there could be hundreds of these potential economies. And in economy 1, R1, the resource holding of person 1, and economy 1 is some list of stuff. This person owns a stereo and a computer and tennis shoes. And the holdings of person 2 are listed, and the holdings of person 3. So this is a set of lists of stuff held by people in this economy. And we have a master set of many possible resource holdings. So this is notation that says we're going to write down a list of what everybody has, and we can do it again and again and again. So now, for simplicity, we've written down 2 lists. We've numbered the first one 0, and the second one 1, and we have economy E0 and E1, and we want to ask the question, do we have a policy that we can call Pareto Optimal, a policy that basically moves stuff around? If you do this policy, the resource holdings in the economy are going to change. Person number 1 will have a different set of holdings. Person number 2 will have a different set of holdings. We've got a policy that accomplishes this transfer of stuff. Is it Pareto Optimal? Well, the definition of Pareto Optimal, that welfare is higher and nobody is worse off, can be written mathematically as the social welfare function of economy 1 is strictly greater than the social welfare of economy 0, and that means that welfare is higher. So the set of who holds what in economy 1 has led to higher welfare than the welfare coming from the set of what is held in economy 0. So first condition for Pareto optimality. Second condition for Pareto optimality is that nobody is worse off. If you take any individual's any one person, this is Joe or Bob or Harry or Mary or Susan, they have greater than or equal to utility under economy 1 than under economy 0. So you take anybody's holdings, ask them, are you better off? And that must be greater than or equal to where they were before. And it has to apply to everybody in this economy. Nobody can be made worse off in Pareto optimality. So those are the 2 conditions in notation to tell us when we have achieved a Pareto optimal policy change. So now that we know what Pareto optimality requires, the social welfare is higher and nobody is made worse off. What's good about that? Well, there's something good about that. We have made at least one person better off, and nobody suffered. Nobody would refuse. Everybody is at least the same, and somebody is better off. So it's benefits without costs. So it seems stupid not to undertake a Pareto optimal policy change. Now, what's bad about Pareto optimality is getting carried away and jumping to the conclusion that's all the government needs to do. It is really, as you'll see, not a complete characterization of the goals of society, simply to make one person better off and then leave all other social ills unaddressed. So it's not everything we want, but it's something worth doing. So let's go through an illustration. I want to start a thought experiment where we'll set up an economy. I'm going to list the members of a society. I'm going to endow them with resource holdings. I'm going to list the stuff they own and their economy. I'm going to compute social welfare. And we're going to run this experiment by asking whether a dictator or a free economy will improve social welfare. So let's try, and I'll start off by listing the members of my society and showing you their economy. So here is a starting point. I've got 3 people in this economy. I've got Joe, Mary, and Kim. And this is the economy. I've written down everything they own. For some reason, this is all the stuff they have, and it makes our job easier when we do our thought experiment. So Joe has 2 Nintendo Stitch consoles. He has a pizza, 4 N95 masks. Mary has a cup of bubble tea, a bar of soap, and 3 Kit Kat bars. And Kim has 17 kittens and a diet root beer. And I've asked them all, how happy are you? I've asked Joe, and Joe says, really love pizza, and I love my Nintendo Stitch. I've got a utility score on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm 8 out of 10. And Mary says, not so happy. I just really don't have what I'm looking for in life. 4 out of 10. And Kim has deal with a lot of kittens. I'm sure she loves kittens, but 17 might be a pretty high number. And so she's running out at 7 out of 10. So that's where we're starting. And first experiment is to try to make these people happier by using central planning to make them happier. I'm going to be the dictator for them, and I'm going to make some transfers of stuff. I'm going to move stuff from one person to another one and see if I can make them happier. So I'm going to take 2 kittens and move them to Joe, and I'm going to take 2 kittens and move them to Mary. So they're going to switch the number of kittens that they have. I'm going to take one of Joe's Nintendos because he doesn't need 2. I'm going to give it to Mary. She seemed pretty bummed out, and so maybe that'll make her happy. And I'm going to take one of the N95 masks, and I'm going to give that to Kim, so Kim can enjoy an N95 mask. So that's my attempt to make everybody happier. Thinking I'm going to be a pretty good dictator. So let's go through. I'm going to show you the new economy that people now have. The numbers of items have now changed. And Joe, I asked Joe, how happy are you now that you've gotten 2 kittens? And we asked Joe, and Joe is allergic to cats. He says, sorry, I was 8, but now with these cats in my house, I'm down to 7. Mary is really thrilled to have gotten her Nintendo Switch. She doesn't like the cats, but she's happier. She's moved from 4 to 5. And Kim has already recovered from COVID-19 and really can't infect anybody, cannot become infected, and giving Kim an N95 mask is not that great. He's going to sell it on eBay, but for now it's just really not worth much to them. So we can ask this question under central planning, did anybody improve their status? And the answer is yes. Some people improved their status. Certainly Mary improved. Well, Mary didn't like the cat, so I'm not sure she did better. Joe got worse, and Kim got better. So some people improved their status. But because Joe's utility went down, this economy did not qualify for Pareto Optimality. Now, we can ask a little bit about whether this economy was fair. Was it fair in order to make these trades? Now, the dictator did look out for Mary and tried to make Mary better off with a Nintendo Switch. I don't think Joe feels it was very fair. So this is probably oppressive to Joe. And part of the real problem with what went on under central planning is that the dictator never sat down with Joe, Mary, or Kim and asked them, what do you want? They just thought they knew everything and went around moving stuff around. And even if the dictator had tried to interview them and ask them, what are you looking for? They know so much more than could possibly be communicated in an interview that I'm not sure interviewing is the solution. So under central planning, we've got a lot of unsolved questions. I'm not sure it improves everybody's status, and Pareto Optimality wasn't achieved. Not sure it was fair, and this whole system of state planning of who owns what has its limitations. So now let's try it again. This time we're going to try it with a free market, and this time I'm going to allow everybody in this economy to be fully informed about what everybody owns and to trade with one another freely until they're done trading. They have to finish. If there are trades that they want to do and they just don't get around to it, we're not happy. We need them to finish trading. And so off they go. And Joe is going to trade 2 kittens back to Kim for root beer. So he's going to send the kittens back and get the diet root beer. He's also going to get 3 Kit Kat bars from Mary, 1 Kit Kat bar from Mary, and give out 1 N95 mask to Mary. So that's all the trades they want to do at this point. After trading, we ask them, how are you? And Joe has moved up from 8 to 9. He's really happy with the Kit Kat bar. And Mary has moved from 5 to 6. She's really coming along. And Kim was very happy to get more kittens back. And so now she's up at 8. So everybody got some utility this time. And they adapted. They changed their holdings. The institutional change that allowed them to improve their well-being was that we allowed them to express their own preferences freely and to keep doing that until there was nothing that they would voluntarily want to do. Now, some things might threaten their success. They might have feelings about what's going on that inhibited their trading. Perhaps they felt that they should give Mary a better deal than perhaps they would have given her if she were not so poor off in this society. So they might have had emotional feelings that might have inhibited their greed. But that's part of life, and maybe we're going to indulge them in feeling some altruism and getting joy from that. So one of the things we saw under free trade is that for every single person trading in a free market, all trades are voluntary. And so the utility gained by goods acquired in a trade is always greater than or equal to the utility lost from the goods surrendered. Under central planning, there were many involuntary trades. We'll just take stuff away from people and give them stuff. And so often their benefit is below their cost. But for free trades, every time there is a trade, the marginal benefit is weakly greater than or equal to the marginal cost. And we can abbreviate that by MB is greater than or equal to MC. Now, if we take that to its full conclusion and we finish trading and we grow our economy into perfect competition, so when there's perfect competition with thousands of people all competing to get marginal benefit greater than or equal to marginal cost, eventually suppliers will raise their prices, and the opportunities to find strictly greater than marginal benefit dry up. And all of the opportunities to do a little bit better than cost are gone. So in equilibrium, marginal benefit equals marginal cost, MB equals MC, and you will see this definition again and again as the definition of efficiency. This is a really important bit of your economics training, by the way. You will hear economists talk about efficient all the time, and every economist who says the word efficient is referring to this slide and saying, I mean by efficient that the marginal benefit of the utility gains of the very next trade is exactly equal to the extra cost of all of society to give that person that gain. So that's efficient, that everything we've accomplished is exactly worth the cost. So with those tools and thoughts in mind, we can begin to define a free market equilibrium, also known as a competitive equilibrium. In a free market equilibrium, the following conditions occur, and they're listed here in red. And if we bring these conditions into society and let people start trading, if we allow everybody to make rational decisions, if we tell everybody, give them the opportunity to know exactly what they want, give them the ability to trade and full opportunities to trade, no discrimination, no barriers to trade for anybody in the society, we forbid them from having envy and altruism and make them care about how their trading will affect somebody else and keep them selfish. We give them no asymmetric information, meaning everybody knows everything about the goods that they're trading. As I said, no barriers to entry, and everything can be bought and sold that you could possibly imagine in your life. And all of the products have no secrets. They're not differentiated. So we allow these red conditions to occur in society. The resources will flow, just like we just saw, and after the population trades their resources, that is the economy. Remember, the list of resources that occurs in a free market equilibrium. So a market failure is an economy where one of these conditions is not true. But if we have all of these conditions in our economy and we observe the resources that are held by the members of society after these conditions occur and the people do their trading, we'll call that a free market equilibrium economy. It is a list of things that has occurred in a free market equilibrium. So remember that last slide. I want to stress this question. How many market failures does it take to prevent a free market from reaching Pareto optimality? The answer was on the last slide, and the answer is one market failure. If one of these conditions is violated, it's not going to be a free market. So let's look at them again and say, in the real world of planet Earth, are we going to find some happy country where every single one of these things is true? Where everybody is rational and able to judge their well-being. Everybody knows what they want. Everybody is able to trade. Where there's no envy or no altruism. Where everybody knows everything about all the products. Quickly, I think you're understanding that there is no country that is able to achieve that, nor could they achieve that, given what we know about the limitations of human biology. There are going to be individuals with learning difficulties who just can't learn what they want. They are going to be people who have addictions. It is human to feel feelings and envy and altruism about other people. And so eradicating envy and altruism are not going to happen. But at the same time, there are things we can do to make it better. We can try to improve information flows. We can try to take down the barriers to entry. We can try to get more people the right to trade if they've been prevented from trading. So we could try to address some of the problems and educate the members who don't know how to make rational decisions. But that leads us to the second question here. Is this, if there are two market failures and you fix one, does that make it better? I wish the answer was a definitive yes, it always makes it better to fix every market failure you can, but the answer is not sure. The welfare theorem that we are going to announce only works if all of the market failures have been corrected. So a market failure is when a market violates one of the conditions for free market equilibrium. So if we've been able to get an economy with zero market failures, and it is truly a free market equilibrium, then we can now announce the first welfare theorem. And the first welfare theorem says that the distribution of resources achieved through a free market equilibrium is Pareto optimal. Now, this is not just an opinion. it's a mathematical theorem where, using the notation I showed you earlier and the conditions that I've shown you can be expressed mathematically, we can actually prove that the distribution of resources in a perfectly free market equilibrium is Pareto optimal. Now, we cannot prove Pareto optimality occurs if we have 2 market failures and we made one better. That has not been accomplished. So all we know is, in this perfect world where everybody trades freely, full information, no envy, no altruism, we can achieve Pareto optimality, which is exciting. And this theorem, when it came out, really helped liberal democracies define what they thought they wanted to do. And liberal democracies said, we like Pareto optimality. Let's try to fight market failures and then give the people in our economies Pareto optimality so that at least we're getting that right. Now, some of you are going to go on from this lecture and run for Congress or Prime Minister or President, and if you forget this slide, bad things might happen, because there are a lot of people who have taken this little tiny snippet of economics and gone off the rails with it on both the left and the right of the political spectrum. So many bad policymakers become bad because they just don't understand 1WT, or the first welfare theorem. Now, it suggests that the first welfare theorem suggests that going from almost Pareto optimal to fully Pareto optimal is definitely worth doing. It's totally a good thing to fix a nearly Pareto optimal situation, because you're going to make people better off without making someone worse off. Go for it. It implies that you probably should focus on the fixable market failures, because if you find somebody who's not able to trade in an economy and there's stuff that people want from that person, it's win-win. Let the person trade, which is one of the market failures that economists often fix. And if you find that lack of information is making people make bad trades and create inefficiency where their marginal benefit is less than their cost because they were not informed about the product, fix that. So the first welfare theorem says focus on the fixable market failures and fix them, because Pareto optimality is a good thing. It's just not everything. Now, here are mistakes that people make. They hear the word free market and they think, well, markets will achieve PO. So as long as we have a market, that's going to make it Pareto optimal. The second, almost bigger mistake is that if the government does anything to an economy, it is going to create a lack of freedom of the market. The government intervention in an economy to create information or to take down barriers to trade will make things worse, that it takes away the freedom. And the fact is that if there are situations where Pareto optimality is not happening, where there are market failures, sometimes government intervention can make it better. But that can be carried too far as well. Markets that fail are not always made better by government intervention. And that's a problem for the people on the left, that there are many government interventions that do not properly address the market failure because they are not carried out properly or fairly or effectively. Human beings are carrying out the acts of the government, and human beings are fallible and biased and discriminatory. So it's not true that every time there's a market failure, the solution is a government intervention. And finally, as I've suggested before, it is a mistake to believe that all we have to do, 100% of government's job to create social welfare, is to create Pareto optimality. The fact is that Pareto optimality is not the sole best indicator of the goodness in an economy. There are many other things that economies care about, and justice and fairness is one of them, and Pareto optimality is not very good at creating the justice and the fairness. So to the point on whether or not a government is always going to make things better. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. Sidgwick is famous for saying that it does not follow that whenever laissez-faire falls short, that government intervenience is expedient, since the inevitable drawbacks of the latter may, in any particular case, be worse than the shortcomings of private enterprise. Government interference may have drawbacks too. All right, so we've covered the first welfare theorem. It says that if we were able to achieve a free market equilibrium, we're going to have Pareto optimality. Let's move on to the second welfare theorem. It says that if you are looking at one economy that might be Pareto optimal, call it E star, and you say, I want that one, I want the Pareto optimality, I want the Pareto optimal economy where Joe has a Nintendo and Mary has an N95 mask. I want that one. Second welfare theorem says you can get it if you are so smart that you know how to initially redistribute the resources and then let people trade. If you knew everybody's preferences and marginal benefits and could predict all of their trade, you could put your thumb on the scale at the start of the trading. Right before they trade, you could give Joe lots of Nintendos, and he'll probably come out with a Nintendo. So second welfare theorem says you could microengineer an economy prior to free trade and make it come out the way you want, with some people getting the stuff that you as a central planner want them to get. This is a welfare theorem that guides social engineering. So these are our background of welfare economics and the welfare theorems, and let's talk about the relevance to the health system, because one of the things we'll be talking about for much of the course is health insurance systems as well as health systems. And if we think about health insurance markets, they're suffering from market failures. Certainly we have envy and altruism that are market failures in the health insurance market. We often initiate health insurance because of altruism towards people who are sick and poor. Health insurance markets do have barriers to entry. There are efficiencies of scale. There are non-differentiated products. There are brands of insurance. There is the Kaiser brand of insurance, which is very differentiated and different from other no-name insurance brands. There's definitely a lot of asymmetric information in insurance markets. The people buying insurance know so much more about their bodies. They know if they're going to get pregnant. They know if their uncle had Tay-Sachs disease. They know so much that it's hard to imagine how fair that is for the insurance companies who don't know as much about people's bodies. And there are not markets for every possible condition for which insurance might be wanted. So given our premonition that insurance markets suffer from a lot of market failures, we should have a lot of trepidation in applying our belief that free markets are going to be fine. Laissez-faire health insurance markets will not achieve competitive equilibrium. We can't get Pareto optimality out of them. If we want them to run, we're going to need a government to do something about it. Now, if we want a government in our healthcare market, there are many options. And one option is for them to just regulate it and allow a free market to happen, but create a lot of rules. Another option is for the government to just take it over and become the nation's health insurance provider. And the regulator takeover question has been decided differently in different countries. USA says we regulate, and United Kingdom says we take it over and we do it by the government. So there are examples of regulation of the insurance industry would be to the idea that there are antitrust laws. There are laws about the need for insurance companies to be in competition. So to answer what should governments do they should examine each policy option, they should compute the net social welfare of each, and they should select the option with the highest social welfare. So throughout this course, we'll go back to that W equals the sum of utilities equation that we started with, and we're going to ask government planners to do that, to make a model of social welfare and ask, what is W under policy A, policy B, policy C? And then pick the W and pick the policy that gives the highest social welfare. That's the idea that economists have in mind when they talk about government intervention to try to make social welfare better. Now, how do we integrate this idea of maximizing social welfare with the idea of liberal democracies that people should vote every 4 years? Well, economists believe that elections are idea markets. When a politician is running for office, they are trying to give you as a voter a forecast of what your utility will be if they win office. So when you see an election ad, that candidate is saying to you, Joe, your utility if I become the president will be 7. That's better than it was. You were at a 4. If you vote for me, you'll get a 7. So they're giving you ideas. This is the policy I would do. Joe, figure out how you do under this policy. They are pitching that, and you have to calculate what will my utility be if this individual gains power. So you win an election by proposing the highest W of U. Again, if there are no barriers to the social welfare function, if like it's an egalitarian welfare function and everybody gets to vote and there's no impedance to voting, this idea that a liberal democracy works because the politicians have been very informative and allowing voters to calculate their future utility, and they win by maximizing the social welfare. Liberal democracies ought to try to get us higher social welfare the way they're set up to work. All right, so we've covered most of what I want to cover in this section. I do want to note that in your textbook by Rice and Unruh, they have a fabulous reference on the conditions for government intervention. And they've basically given us a list of the market failures that would justify market intervention. And they've talked about how many of them are affecting the health economy. So Rice and Unruh are making the point that the demand for health insurance and services are affected by these 5 market failures. The person is the best judge of their own welfare. They have sufficient information. They can predict the results of their decisions. They're rational. That social welfare is the sum of individual utilities. These 5 conditions get in the way of a free market equilibrium occurring in the demand for health insurance policy and the demand for medical care, doctor visits, and medicines. There are externalities of consumption that also come in to the health economy. Negative externalities of consumption, meaning bad stuff happens to other people because of our own decisions about using health care. Positive externalities of consumption for the same reason. And the 8th market failure is that consumer tastes are predetermined and eternal. And that market failure occurs because there's learning in every economy and there's learning in the health economy. So these are the market failures that also affect the health economy. And finally, there are market failures that affect competitive supply. Supply and demand are independently determined, will be violated when we see doctors and hospitals supplying services and telling patients that they need to take those services or die. That amount of power creates this co-determination of supply and demand. We'll find firms that have monopoly power. We will find increasing returns to scale in the health economy. We'll find that there are market failures that drive the profit motive and create problems for trust. And the fact that firms maximize profits can be a problem in the health economy. We'll have a whole hour on profit maximization creating market failures in which pharmaceuticals are produced on an annual basis. The idea that profit maximization results in the most efficient production and the highest consumer welfare, we'll see is violated in many parts of the health economy. And finally, a problem that justifies market intervention is that we would like to see that the distribution of wealth is approved by society. And if you allow a free market to distribute the wealth, there's no guarantee that you'll achieve the approval of society. And the democracy can succumb to hijacking the approval. If it's possible for the rich to put their candidates into office, the rich will ensure that we approve of the distribution of wealth to the rich, and hijack the ability of democratic voting to allow this entire project of liberal democracy to give a distribution of wealth that is approved by everybody. So in summary, on this section on Pareto Optimality, the question of should governments intervene in the health system, we'll see that there are indeed market failures that do interfere with Pareto Optimality. And there is a possibility that governments can correct market failures through institutional change. We've seen 14 different market failures. We know that only one market failure could mess things up. What we'll want to do throughout the course and throughout our job as health economists is to make models of potential government solutions and model W, model social welfare under these policies, and ask, did we make social welfare better? And if we keep doing that, we can probably help a liberal democracy try to do a better job. But I think we've been tuned in to some of the challenges that we'll face because the liberal democracies don't have their act together. They don't take into account everything they should, and sometimes democracy itself has been threatened and the laws have not been applied equally. But that gets us off track, and I'd like to get us back on track in the next section, which will cover public goods and merit goods. So tune in soon for the next section on government intervention and the health system.